Testing. 1,
Today's
2, 3.
June 18th. Nope.
Yeah.
Tuesday was the 17th.
I don't know.
Wednesday
I
was
didn't
the
bring it out.
15th. I think today's the 19th.
Monday was the 15th. 16th, 17th, 18th. It's
Oh.
Thursday.
Okay, I've lost it then. Today's the 18th.
Do you know what tomorrow is?
Yeah, I know what tomorrow is.
And this is Terry Crupe. So I'm going to start with the hardest question, which is, today's Thursday. Yesterday, you had a lot of, I thought, really inspirational things to say about being alive. And we kind of got into some existential type, who am I, why am I here? And your mom talked about courage, and you being the embodiment of courage. And I felt that when you were talking about ways, how you've learned to live and the psychological hurdles to get over of telling your body, yes, you're going to try this. But then Tuesday, the first day I was here and met you, you said at one point something like, given the choice between being a quad and not being alive, I would still choose not being alive.
Yes.
So, one of the things to me that's so universal about you is that you can speak to the two sides. You can speak to the two sides that I think we all have, in addition to all the sides in between. With the side that says, I'd really rather not be here dealing with this at all. And the side that says, what the hell, I'm going to keep trying, I'm here.
I woke up again.
I woke up again. I think that's a mud dauber, but it could be a wasp. A wasp interested in a chair. Are you worried?
No.
Okay. So I didn't know. People do not. People. So I didn't know if you wanted to speak to the fact that you're aware of those,
If I'm aware of.
these two.
She knows.
I love you.
Answer for me.
I love you. That a person can have both of those
Coexist.
attitudes going on, both of those states of mind going on.
Coexisting.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I touched on the fact that when you're first injured and you're told you're not going to live, I mean, it's no different than, I guess, if you went to the doctor and they told you you had terminal cancer and said, you've maybe got a year or two to live. Every day of those 2 years, when you wake up, that thought is like the first one on the list. Like a computer booting up, this is a parameter. Live, because you don't have that long to keep on going. That kind of jades your attitude about what you do and what you have to do and what you don't have to do.
Right.
And ask anyone around me, they'll tell you that I've been telling them I'm dying for 29 years. Because that was what I was told. That's what I expected. And especially the first 5 years, even though I was going through all the motions of, doing what Voc Rehab said I should do, going to school, trying to be independent, I was only doing it because the alternative was to do nothing. And I can't just do nothing.
Right.
But that attitude of I'm broken and I could die at any time. And then having, simple little reminders like taking a drink and you swallow the wrong way, and because you don't have a diaphragm you can't cough and you're about choked to death. I mean, there's so many instances that I don't know why I'm still here because of the things I've done or the mishaps I've run into over the years as a quad. I mean, even as a quad, I don't know why I'm still here. Not because I'm a quad, but because of things that have happened to me because of my condition. You want an example, I'm sure.
Like what?
Like one day I think I was still living in St. Louis. And it was one of those days I just needed to get out of the house, take a drive. And I drove down to, I don't know, Sullivan or Steelville or something like that. About an hour's drive out of St. Louis. And I thought, that's enough, let's drive back home. I just needed to get out, not have it. Anyway, when I got off the highway and went to go turn and make my thing back onto the highway, when I hung the right-hand turn, that's when my body decided to spasm. And when it did, both legs came up underneath the steering wheel and stopped me from turning anymore. And I'd already, gas was applied, so the van goes around the corner and down the shoulder, and I just managed to move my leg and flip the wheel back before I hit the rock wall. And I sat there a minute going, all right, body, you done trying to kill me again? Drove back up onto the shoulder, got on the highway, and drove home. Silly stuff.
Yeah.
It's like the time, I got stuck in the backyard and almost had hypothermia because nobody found me for 3 hours. I've done the same thing about falling out of my chair, losing my balance when I'm out in the yard, don't have a cell phone or something. I just lay there in the sun until somebody comes home or I hear somebody and I can yell to them, or stuff like that happens all the time.
That takes an incredible amount of patience.
Yeah, because you can't do a thing. And even when I fall or something and I have access to a phone and I know help is coming, it's still the longest 20-something minutes while you just sit there going, okay, thanks for making me feel humble again. Here I am thinking I'm independent and can do what I want, and every time I do, smack. You silly boy. There was another time I was, I don't know if this was because I was a quad or just an idiot, but I was driving, I was out in Columbia, Missouri, and I had driven into St. Louis visiting folks, and my father had given me his old computer. And I was headed back to Columbia, which is like an hour and a half drive one way. And it was pouring sheets, torrential type downpours. I had the cruise control on, 70 miles an hour in the fast lane. Came up over a small ridge, which, you wouldn't even think about in dry weather. But as soon as I popped up over the top of the ridge, the van started hydroplaning, started going sideways. And as much as I tried to correct it, I did 360s right in front of a semi who was in the lane next to me, went in front of him, off the shoulder of the highway, down the embankment backwards 30, 40 feet into the little ditch by the side road, and just boom, boom, boom. Computers and everything were flying, monitors, and I landed at the bottom and I was like, damn. About 5 minutes later, some guys, good old boys with a pickup, came by and said, you need some help? I said, oh yeah, can you tow me out of here? They pulled me out, and turned the van around and went back home. But I still remember as soon as the van came to a rest and stopped and everything stopped spinning and all this, because as soon as it started spinning, I went, this is it. I ain't gonna make it out of this one. That was the first thought that went through my head. But as soon as everything stopped spinning and the van stopped and everything, my first impression was looking up at the highway again, and the semi that was right behind me just went whoosh by it, 80 miles an hour. I was like, if I hadn't gone off the highway and stopped in front of his lane, I'd be pancaked. Oh, that's not being a quad, that's just being stupid. Driving too fast in the rain. But if the people on the road knew I was next to them, doing my little thing with 4 muscles, they'd probably be, speed up, honey. Slow down, let this one get by.
Yeah.
The other thing is bad infections and stuff. They really take their toll on me. UTIs, bladder infections, things like that. I just can't get rid of them. I mean, they're a constant factor now, no matter what I do. And when they really get a hold of me, I have to live with the 105 temperatures for 4 and 5 days, 104.5, whatever you want to call it, for 4 and 5 days while the antibiotics kick in, and all you want to do is curl up in a ball and flip a switch, wake me when I feel better type thing, because they're killer. But it's like you're handed a death sentence, and then while one person's sitting here handing you the death sentence, there's another person standing here telling you you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. I'm not referring to, I'm talking, social worker or the same doctor in the next breath. But it got ingrained, and I believed him that I wasn't going to live. So it influenced how I lived and the way I lived and what I decided, and that was why I left Mom's as soon as I could, to get my life back for however long it was going to be, and try to have some semblance of what I considered a normal life again. I think that was my problem the whole time. Even though I knew I was a quad, I kept trying to be normal, or just not focus on the fact that I was a quad. And, have pity parties and I can't do this and I can't do that. Well, instead, try to figure out what you can do. The more I could do, the more I found I could do. And the more I found I could do, the easier it got to try something that I wouldn't even think of trying to do before. So it sort of snowballs itself, and all of a sudden you find yourself 10 years down the road with undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees, and you're like, how did I get here? It was just getting up one day at a time. And every year, for the first 2-3 years, boy, I'd get teetotal and smashed on the 19th of June.
You get what?
Teetotaling smashed on the 19th. But after about the 3rd year, I was like, this is pathetic. Get over it. Because the last thing I wanted to do was be the person who pulled everybody else down in whatever crowd I was in. I didn't want people looking at me and going, oh my gosh. I think I took more motivation from other people than internalizing it from myself. I didn't want to be It's the right word. Never wanted to be one of those people that was always complaining all the time. Do you know the type of people I'm talking about? No matter what's wrong in their life, they've got to tell you what the story and, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what happened to me, and that was not what I wanted to end up like. So when I was in pain, I did my best not to let anybody know. There was no point. Nobody could do anything. And the pain's been there from the beginning. It's just gotten worse because gravity keeps winning.
I wanted to ask about pain. I wanted to ask about pain. If you wanted to say anything about, I don't know. I was thinking about, I also wanted you, after we talk about pain, to talk a little bit about the thing you were saying the other day about snowflakes, about everybody being different, whatever degrees and parts of your body you have feeling in and have control in, have control over. But I don't know, I was kind of pondering it last night in bed, like where you have feeling and don't have feeling, and where you have pain and what kind of pain it is. And you don't have to say a lot about it, but I was just curious how that is.
I think I touched on it a little yesterday, but people with spinal cord injuries experience pain in the part of their body that's paralyzed. The signals going to the brain don't get interpreted correctly, though. So if, for example, if my foot was twisted, sideways or something because I caught it in a doorway and more or less twisted my ankle, I wouldn't feel my ankle, but I would feel the parts of my body that have sensation would start interpreting the pain that the foot was sending, and it would manifest it in hyperflexia or dysreflexia, where the system's kind of go into overload mode, start shooting adrenaline into the body, pumping the heart up, blood pressure, and I ended up, I'm not sweating because I'm hot right now. I'm sweating because my back hurts and I'm in pain. It's just how it manifests itself with me. As far as other people with spinal cord injuries, they use generic labels because they have to figure out a way to categorize us. But you can put 5 quadriplegics, all with the same level of injury as me, and each one of us will have or not have something the other one doesn't. And that's what I meant by the snowflakes. When you look at us, all together, you see 4 or 5 people in a wheelchair. But when you sit down and you talk to the 4 or 5 people that all have the same level of injury, you find out that this one can move 2 fingers on this hand, or this one, can wiggle a toe, but can't use their hand. This one's so paralyzed they can't move their arms or shoulders, but they have a sensation over their entire body still.
Yeah.
We're all the same level injury, but it's all manifested according to the individual, and there ain't no 2 of us alike. But you can say that about any people. I mean, even your able-bodied people, you can say they're all the same and sit 5 of them down and find out, each one has different aches, pains, stamina, desires,
What I liked about that, what I thought was really important about that was the way that people, it's not just doctors who look at people in order to try to categorize them, that everybody does that.
Everybody does it.
I thought that was just a really important part to bring out. That when you're looking at, for instance, somebody in a wheelchair, you really don't know. You can't make any assumptions about what that person can do or not do.
No. And there's plenty of times that I'll go to a store or whatever, and when I'm parking in the handicap spot, I'll see somebody else parking in a handicap spot with the tag and everything, and I'll see him get out and walk into the store, and I'll be like, you can't, even though your mind's going, hey, you SOB, what's your handicap? Or, even something smart like, why are you parking here? Because then, you get I have a steel plate in my knee and a rod up my leg, and there's disabilities you can't see that aren't apparent,
Yeah.
that these people live with. And you can't make snap decisions like, oh, this person's just fat and lazy and doesn't want to walk an extra 10 feet from another parking spot. I mean, there are people that do that. We all know there are, but over the years I've gotten to the point where I don't fight it anymore, because just because I can't see their handicap doesn't mean they're not living with one, or they don't have one, or they're not in an extreme amount of pain. So it's learning how to stop judging. That's like one of my favorite mottos of life: judge no one, do no harm. Well, do no harm first, and then try not to judge anyone. I don't know if that got what you wanted or not,
totally,
but
absolutely did. And that's like the ancient wisdom, that's what really, all the great religions and philosophies are teaching.
that's what it basically boils down to.
Judge no one and do no harm.
Do no harm and judge no one. It's kind of simple. It's no different than the golden rule that we were all taught, in kindergarten. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I got that one drilled in, kindergarten and previous to kindergarten. That was the golden rule.
But doing it.
And the golden rule always was better than commandments, sins, things you weren't supposed to do like that. If you followed the golden rule, it didn't matter what religion you believed in, whether you believed in God. That alone, I think, grants you a morality safety net. I don't need, or I never felt the need to have inspiration coming from an external source like a God, as long as I could focus on the fact that if I'm not doing any harm, or doing my best not to do any harm, if there is such a being, then I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's what they would have me be doing anyway. Judge no one, do no harm. Yeah.
It's a good time for that.
I'm gonna slice that up, put it in, right, it's ready.
We got a lot of ground to cover.
I gotta get, while I'm pulling up your resume,
Your laptop, I mean?
yeah, I'm gonna get it. We were just talking about pain. I wanted to finish off there. I was asking you if you take anything, if you get up and take anything for pain, and you said no.
No.
And we had just talked about where you have pain, and I thought it's really, really interesting and informative for people in general who don't understand aspects of paralysis, that you can still be receiving messages of pain in the parts of your body that can't move. I didn't know that. I think I must have known it when I knew my uncle, but I've forgotten it.
That goes back to the snowflake. That goes back to that snowflake analogy. It just so happens that my particular injury, it took away the epidermal layer sensitivity of the parts of my body I can't move or feel. It didn't take away the tissue below the skin. It didn't take away the muscle. It didn't take away the bone, the arteries that pump blood. Those, believe it or not, I can still feel. I can feel how bunched up my organs are. I feel a radiating discomfort, around my central area. I feel a heat and a searing, generating pain coming from the lower back, right along the spine, especially on the left side. I mean, it's like somebody took a sword and then said, okay, that's going to stay there for the next, it ain't coming out until, because nobody's been able to identify what it's being caused by. And I've had no luck. And I think I went to chiropractors for like 6 months. They did MRIs, they were looking for bone spurs, they were looking for nerve damage, something that would be triggering this. But no neurologist has ever been able to tell me why I can feel pain in parts of my body that are supposed to be paralyzed. If, for example, I was looking away and you tapped me on the knee because you wanted my attention, I would feel the vibration through the bone, and I would turn around to see what. I wouldn't know that you were tapping me on the knee, but the brain would process, a knock, a vibration, and I'd look to see what's going on.
That's very interesting.
But I've never been able to not be in pain. The parts of my body that are still not paralyzed, that are usable and that have full sensitivity, they don't hurt. Well, they hurt after, I work. Just like anybody's muscles would, be sore. But the rest of the body, because it's paralyzed, none of the muscles hold the body in the form it's supposed to be held in. So that's where I say gravity takes over and starts pulling things in different directions. I don't think my spine's been straight for the whole time I've been in a wheelchair. I'm pretty sure it does an S because it collapses on itself. And not to shock the viewers or anything here, but when I sit up, you can see my ribs just about go through to the back and put pressure on the lungs. And then all the organs that would normally be up here all just kind of moosh down here. So you do retrospective conversion every day? That's what you do for a living? And you didn't even know it. So you're a librarian.
I am definitely an organizer and archivist. That I know.
I'm looking at education. What do you want?
Yeah.
Vocational rehabilitation. Didn't we talk about this yesterday?
Yeah.
About how they, pushed the reskill and do something, find, a marketable skill. And kind of pushed until I finally acquiesced and said, sure, fine. You want me to go to school, I'll go to school. It's not like I wanted to. And at first it was very hard because of the manual wheelchair. We covered this? Going to St. Louis Community College at Merrimack, and
Yeah.
I talked about school.
Was that your first wheelchair?
Manual?
I mean, the one that you would have been in community when you were going to community college.
When I first showed up at community college, all I owned was a manual wheelchair with, the little knobby rims on it and my little leather gloves. That's how most people get around in manual wheelchairs that are able to have the strength to. Most people don't want a power chair because as soon as you accept the benefits of sitting in a power chair, you give up all the benefits you were getting by moving yourself. Because the only thing I do to move is use the joystick. That's how I'm able to mow. When I get the mower started, it's just a regular push mower. I stiff arm it with one arm and I drive the chair. The chair is what's mowing the yard. I'm just guiding the mower. It's only just this year, and I'm still embarrassed about it, but I had to go get a new mower because I couldn't pull the rope anymore to start it. And this one, of course, since it has an electronic starter on it, it also has the self-propelled, which makes it harder to push unless you use the self-propelled part because of the wheels are geared. It's not just a free roller. So now when I cut my grass, and at first it really angered me, that I couldn't push more. I don't know why. But I got this new mower and I was like, all right, if I got to do this. It's like I was saying about the battery operated tools. Kept figuring out new ways to work smarter and not harder on myself because it was getting harder and harder to do things. But now I would miss my mower if someone were to take it away from me. Because I finally got the cable adjusted to the speed I want when I raised the bar for it to. Because when I first got it, I'd raise the bar, the thing would take off out of my hand. I couldn't go fast enough to keep up with it. So like a guy, I finally broke down and got the manual out to see how to adjust the speed cable on it. Played around with that. But yeah, it was a big thing to give up the manual chair. It was a big blow to the ego, that you couldn't. It was one more thing you knew, that was being added to the long list of you couldn't do. You can't manage this. You're not strong enough. You're not fast enough to be able to be on a college, a big campus, and be expected to get, from one side of the campus to the other, or one building to another, that you would normally see students walking at a, very fast pace. I got 5 minutes to get to my next class or whatever, 10 minutes. And I'm sitting here, And then if you get to a part of the campus where the elevation changes, try doing a ramp in a manual wheelchair and being a quad. What I had on my manual chair was what they called backup safety brakes, and you clicked them on and they didn't allow the tires to go backwards. So you could push forward and it would stop you, and you could get another grip, and you could push forward and it would stop you, and you could get another grip, and it was just like a ratchet, and you pushed your way up a ramp. Now, paras that have full, from the waist up, all their muscles, to them, they're fast enough that they don't need that stop. They can just keep on going. But me being a quad, each time I had to line up both hands to get a push, and push equally, because if I didn't push equally, I'd turn slightly, and being my left hand always being stronger, I always drove a little bit to the right, because this arm couldn't keep up. So I think I was my third year of being a quad that I finally sat down in a power wheelchair, and I've never gotten back out of one.
So I have a question. When that kind of thing is going on, say I'm able-bodied, I'm walking by, I see this guy, maybe it's raining, and he's doing what you said, trying to ratchet himself inch by inch to get up a ramp. What do I stop and say, can I help you?
There's nothing wrong with asking. I've never been offended by people who asked if they could help. The people who have offended me, and it's not necessarily their fault, are the ones that just assumed and would start pushing.
Right.
Here, let me help you, before they wouldn't ask. They would simply step in and take over. And that was like, invading personal space. And there have been times when, I remember a time I was cutting the grass. We lived in a house that was only 30 feet off of a street, because it was city, small college town, sidewalks and all that stuff. And this woman pulled her car over, good looking woman too, girl, whatever. I was probably 30 or so. And I wasn't paying attention to the traffic going by or anything, and mower's loud, All of a sudden I got this really cute girl in my face, and she's like, "Can I cut your grass for you?" And it didn't strike me at the time to say yes or no. My reply was, "Am I doing it wrong?" And she went, No, don't you want help?" I went, "No, I'm okay." Because I look at activities like that as physical therapy. And I love the people the doctors who say, "Do you participate in any physical therapy programs? Does a PT come out and see you?" And I'm like, "No, I live." When you wake up and it takes 20 to 25 minutes, sometimes longer, to get dressed, that's a workout. When it takes another 5 minutes to transfer your body into a wheelchair, get yourself situated and everything, and make your bed, get in the bathroom and brush your teeth, and this is all work. This is all physical therapy. That's all it is.
And are you doing all that yourself?
I have. Always have. Ever since I got that kick in my butt from that girl I was living with. I told you that story, Debbie. I love her to death. But we were just, we couldn't, it just wasn't meant to last between us. But her love for me was strong enough that she could turn around just like a mother and say, "I love you enough that I'm just going to walk out on you and go to work and not worry about it, and know that you're going to be able to figure it out on your own. And if you're not, well, I'll be back, and you're safe where you're at, in bed." I was like, this is no longer fun. When people tell you, that would be no different than a quadriplegic who requires a caregiver, which at the time I did. Somebody always was taking care of me because I wasn't taking care of myself. I couldn't. So it's no different than someone who has to hire like a 24-hour nurse or a caregiver to help them. It would be no different if that caregiver looked at the person that had hired them, even though I didn't hire this woman, if they said, "No, I got other things to do right now, and I'll be back, and you just sit there until I get back." Ooh, that made me mad. I was so angry. But I used the anger to get myself dressed and to do a transfer all by myself. And it took me like an hour and a half or whatever it took. But I finally got up. And from then on, I figured out what I could do with all the anger that builds up inside. I can just keep pushing myself forward with it.
And when was that?
That was 83. And for the next for the next decade, I was an independent quad who relied on nobody for anything unless I fell out of my chair or, fell down because I couldn't get back up. Didn't have the strength to pull myself back into a wheelchair. And I would be creative about it too. I mean, if you're home alone and you fall out of a wheelchair, I'd drag cushions off the couch and stack them. And then I'd, scoot and scoot till I was on one cushion. And then I'd try to scoot and scoot till I was on two cushions. And I'd try and scoot until I could get onto the couch that had no more cushions. And then even then it was, a 4, 5, 6 jump to get my hips up to where the wheelchair was, and I usually always never made it. And even if I got myself halfway up there at some point, I'd slip and fall back. There was just never enough strength in what was left of my body to move all the part that couldn't move. But I learned when I transfer in my van, a lot of people would drive from their wheelchair. A lot of quads that do drive, they go straight in under the wheel. The floor lowers, little locks come up onto the tires and locks their chair in place, and they drive from their wheels or wheelchair. When I first got a van and they asked me how I wanted to drive it, I said from a seat like anybody else, so that if I can't drive and somebody needs to drive it for me, they can drive, and that seat's just like a regular seat. That's why I went with the electric seat configuration. But I learned that the easiest way to transfer for me is to have something I can set my head on, like a balance point, a tripod. So like when I do a transfer in my van, when I'm ready to transfer, I drop my left foot off the footrest, I move my right one over so that my body's, shifted more. This armrest goes off, this hip rest has to come off. And then using a hand here and a hand here, I'll lean forward and put my head on the back of the passenger seat. And I'll use it to balance the body while I shift my hips into the driver's seat. And then I pull my legs along with me and turn the chair around, and you keep maneuvering your legs until you're down and into the driving position and you've got them tucked up under the wheel, but you're got to make sure that, they're not close to the pedals. I've done that before. Try driving on the highway and having your foot back from the gas pedal and underneath it, but suddenly getting a muscle spasm in your leg, and the tennis shoe or something catches the gas pedal, and you're going 90, trying to get the cramp out, but not have it bounce back and, hit the wheel and affect you while you're driving at 90, trying to... It's happened before. It's not bad when it happens on the interstate, but when it's in town, that's a little spooky. All of a sudden, no, get off the gas. Or just the opposite. You'll be at a stop sign or something and you'll have a cramp, and you'll be watching the light and holding the brake and trying to readjust the leg that cramped, and realize that the toe came back just enough and then landed on the brake. And you'll be driving and going, why are we going so slow? You look down and you got a foot on the brake. Oh, get off of there. So driving's been a trip. But it opened up a whole new world for an able-bodied person to be able to sit in the van and drive normally. So they didn't have to use the hand controls. Yeah. Driving opened the world back up to me, though.
Yeah. And when did you resume driving after the accident?
Well, did we get on camera about the first van I had that my dad helped me get through the Lions Club? I thought we did. And how I did my own seating system, for my own belts, and...
Okay.
Do you remember? I wasn't supposed to be driving it yet. They had a lift in there for it and the seat base and all that. But we hadn't figured out a seat belt restraint system that would work yet, a harness or whatever. Nobody was home one day and I wanted to go out. So I got 2 belts and got myself in the van and transferred and got turned around and I strapped them like boleros, over the back of the seat and then across my chest and one on each side and tried it. It was like, I got enough room to reach and it all seems like it'll work. They were elastic belts though, that's why they had to give. They weren't leather ones, And off I went. And I was doing fine at 10, 20, 30 miles an hour. I was, going to the stop sign, putting my blinkers on because this was the first time I'd ever driven by myself. And I hadn't had any lessons yet as driving as a quad. I mean, I knew how to drive, of course, from before. And I knew what all my controls would do and how to operate it. So I was practicing, and that was pretty deep in, my house was pretty deep into a subdivision. So, it took quite a few turns and stops to get out to the entrance. When I got out to the entrance, and I gave it a little bit too much gas than I would normally need for a turn. And when I did, the momentum of me turning and pulling, because the way the hand works, when you're pushed in towards the dash, you're pushing the brake. When you pull the handle down towards you, you're accelerating. So I started turning, I pulled the gas. Because of the turn, it started pulling my body this way. As it pulled my body this way and my hand on the holding the gas, pulled the gas more, it sped up and the whole thing just accelerated itself in a split second. And the van did a big wide 360, went out of the subdivision, came around, almost went into the next parking lot perfectly, but missed it, jumped the curb, and went straight into an 8-inch pine tree. And when it hit the tree, it pushed me forward so hard, and because they were just elastic belts, I slid right out from under them and slid down underneath the driver's wheel, the steering wheel. And nobody could see me. And my window was down because it was hot and it was a warm day. And I remember, some cars, I remember hearing, did you see that? And the trees broke because I cracked the tree right in half and the tree went bonk. And I remember them coming up to the van going, I don't think there's anyone in it. And I'm like, I'm down here, hey! And they're like, oh, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. Of course, the police showed up and they're like, what are you doing driving? Well, I have my license.
And you didn't get a ticket or infraction?
Oh yeah, of course I did. But the thing was, I totaled the van that my dad and the Lions Club and all of them had, fundraised. And
First trip out of the...
first trip. You hit an 8-inch tree.
Yeah.
It had a big old imprint of a tree in the very center of the van that probably went from where the bumper was halfway into the engine compartment. And that tree was just snapped.
So that was very...
That was around 83. So I didn't get another van until after I finished my associate's degree. That was my graduation present to myself. Because when the original lawsuit was settled with Oklahoma and I had my few dollars, I bought a house with cash and I used the whole sum. And then used my Social Security disability to pay my utilities, and because of my income level was eligible for food stamps, and took in 2 roommates to help with utilities because it was a 3-bedroom house. And but in 85 I refinanced the house so I could have some of the equity, and I went out and bought myself a Chevy Astro van. Brown, looked like a UPS truck. And Voc Rehab took it in and did all the modifications for me so that I could drive. And this one, I took lessons and had to get my license again, and I've got all kinds of restrictions on my license. I have to have, certain mirrors, certain hand controls, certain belts, and it's all, I have an extra card on my license that lists all the restrictions so that when you read the codes in the restriction box, you know what they are. Because I've got like 5 or 6 different restriction codes. And you would have a restriction code if you had to like wear glasses when you drove or something like that. Yeah. I've got 5 or 6 restriction codes. And some of them are as silly as, must have side view mirrors, that stick out because it's a van and, whatnot. And it was odd. But yeah, I got me a van in '85 and then went on vacation to Florida as a treat for getting an associate's degree and making it as far as I had the first 5 years. Because I was supposed to be dead after 5 years, or before 5 years was up.
And you're opening a bottle cap and drinking with using fingers that don't work.
Well, I use my mouth a lot too. As you probably just saw, to twist the lid back on without even thinking about it. I mean, it's like between the 3, I can make a hand.
Yeah. Okay.
The community college. At some point, while I was still getting my degree, my associate's degree, I got the electric wheelchair. And I remember one day sitting in class, listening to the lecture, and it was always weird being a person in a wheelchair because they would have to take a desk out of a row so that you could park yourself and look like somebody in a desk, but you were always riding on your lap or a lap board, or so you always had stuff you had to carry with you to be a student. Anyway, because I was in a wheelchair, I always had to sit in the front row. And I hated it because I was never a front row sitter, But anyway, and it was usually the front row nearest to the exit because you couldn't block anybody else. Anyway, we were sitting there listening to one of these boring lectures. I don't even remember what it was on. I think it was world religions or some philosophy type course. And he was a droner. So I was taking my notes and everything, but the room was very quiet, Nobody's talking, everybody's scribbling. But all of a sudden I heard this dripping. Drip, drip, drip. I'm like, I was looked up at the roof to see if there was, a leak somewhere. And then I lifted my notepad and realized my catheter had broken. And the urine had gone through the cushion and was going out, because I sit on a slight slant, was rolling out the back and dripping onto the battery boxes on the back of my chair. And then it was, once it pooled enough there, it was running off the battery box and it was dripping onto the floor, which was right in front of these girls' feet that was behind me. And when I finally saw it all, and all I did was just grab my stuff, wheeled my chair around, turned around as quick as I could, and went out the door. And the whole way is this little trail following me down the hall. And I went to the nearest payphone I could get to, and so called my stepfather because my mom was at work. And, it wasn't time for my chauffeur to come by. There was, hours of school left that I would have had to sit and beg somebody to please come and get me and take me home, and embarrassing situations like that. And I don't think I ever went back to that class. I think I dropped the course. I was so mortified.
You couldn't go back. Oh, God. The stuff we lived through.
Oh,
So in terms of college and time frames, are we? I guess we've talked some about the associate degree.
yeah.
One of the things I want to track is the your intellectual development. You know, here are these things. You know, here are these things that the skill set that you've learned and that you had an aptitude for anyway in terms of the computer work. So I want to trace that because you've got, you know, the only thing we've really stuff is.
I've always known I was smart because I grew up listening to my mom's stories about what I was like as a kid, the parts that I don't remember. So I knew I was intelligent, but I never, I don't think I ever, or at least I never wanted to look down on other people because they weren't as smart, or they didn't catch things as fast as I did, or they didn't see things the way I saw things. But when you enter the vocational rehabilitation system, they put you through a battery of personality tests, IQ tests, to determine where and what your interests lie and where, you know, they should concentrate their efforts and funding, because they paid for a lot. That was all state, you know, and never had to be paid back and stuff to get me back to a marketed skill. So all that stuff went on before I ever set foot in a classroom. I don't remember the test names, but you know, like what color's your parachute type things, and personality tests to see, you know, where your leanings were, and everything always came back just like it had always come back, that I leaned more towards the artistic side of the brain, that I was highly intelligent, and that I had an IQ that usually ran.
Like, smart, had an IQ of.
Anytime I've ever been tested for an IQ test, it always came back somewhere between 140 and 148, usually towards the 148 more than the 140. It just depended on the test and how much I really cared about, you know, what I scored on it. Sometimes, you know, they irritated me that I had to take them, so I'd, you know, answer questions wrong purposely. That's why there was such a range. But I mean, I knew I was smart, so they kept telling me that I should go into like social work. And some people are like born to that, where they want to help people, listen to other people, but it didn't appeal to me. I always wanted to be a pilot. I always wanted to fly, or I wanted to be an artist of some sort. I always wanted to draw or be able to paint. Like my aunt could paint. She had an operatic voice. I couldn't carry a tune to save my soul. No instrument I tried worked. So when I got out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, because all the things I wanted to do, I wasn't any good at. So I started finding ways to be creative in other ways. Like, I went into printing. I got into graphic design. And I learned how to, you know, I knew how to run a lot of equipment, and I learned how to run a printing press. And one of my earlier jobs that wasn't restaurant work was running the print shop for a travel agency and doing all their little tri-folded brochures that, you know, and changing the little pictures and destinations and times of the that they would hand out. To me, that was, you know, a way for me to express the creative side of my brain, which is always the side that felt stronger. So nothing in school, there's no, you can't be a quad and go into like, you know, art, because you can't do it to begin with, and you couldn't before either. So it's not the fact that, you know, you're a quad, you can't do it now. But losing the hands, I lost a lot of that desire and what fed the creative side of my brain by doing things, models, jigsaw puzzles, you know, whatever, things like that. Climbing trees, you know, can't do any of that stuff anymore. School, when I first started, they told me your first couple semesters, just get your basics, your histories, your 101 classes out of the way. And then we'll figure out, you know, where to go. One of the classes required me to go to the computer lab and do something. And I thought it was a neat place. I was like, oh, I can play with computers. But even when I was playing with computers, I had learned I couldn't type. How do you type on a computer? At first, I had this little thing I had to attach to my hand that I would stick a pencil in, and I would hit a key at a time like this. Well, that got old. So then I figured out that if I flip my thumb underneath my index finger, like so, then I could two-finger type. And once I got the two-finger typing, there was no stopping me on a computer keyboard. And then they invented the mouse. Of course, I have to two-hand the mouse. I move it around and hold it in place while I use a knuckle to press a button or something when I get to where I'm going. But that's how I did on my computer, was two fingers. But even typing, all I'm doing is being able to lift that wrist and drop it again. I have no force when I drop the wrist. All I'm doing is releasing the ability to hold it up. But I could push down with these muscles so I could type. So that's when I started taking computer classes and learning the different programming languages and learning the science of designing architectures at the time of how they made computer networks.
And when was that? What year approximately?
That was during my associate's degree, so that would be 83 to 85. And once I found that I liked computers, then that's what I focused on. Changed the degree.
You got 1 minute left, so. Oh, this is so good. This is good stuff. Let's see where my other paper is. This is really good stuff. I'm excited.
So I've gotten us to 85.
Yeah, good job.
It's only 5 years. We are jumping around though.